Hello everyone, and welcome to the 146th Melbourne AWS User Group meetup. It's a lot of meetups. So thank you all for coming, or if you're joining us online, thank you for being there. First of all, in the spirit of reconciliation, the Melbourne AWS User Group acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. Our in-person meetup is being held on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners of this land. We pay our respect to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples today. Additionally, I wish to remind everybody that there is a code of conduct for our meetup. Usually, I would go, this is a short version, there's a very short version, which is be nice to each other. But apparently, it turned out last month that was not good enough. So I just want to remind everybody, be nice to each other. I mean it, seriously. If somebody does not want to talk to you, respect that. If you think it's nice, or you think it's okay to talk to people who do not appreciate that, it's not. Okay? Don't say bad things to people. I would explain this to my 4-year-old girl. I can't make it much easier. Just be nice to each other, be good, and if somebody behaves in a way to you that you don't appreciate, you can let us know. If you see somebody behaving to somebody else that does not look like proper behavior, please let us know. Okay. On other topics, you can find us on the web, on our website, LinkedIn, Mastodon, YouTube. If you're watching this online, you should know what the YouTube one is, because otherwise it's very hard to look at. But somebody did not update this slide correctly. That somebody is me. I'm doing the introductions right now. The what's new section, this is not since reInvent, that will be too much. This is just for this past month. This is then followed by our first speaker, Suri, who will be talking about SageMaker Unified Studio. And after that, Matt will take over for a talk about Q, Bedrock, and agentic programming. I'm sure nobody here has heard the term Gen AI before, but that's might be covered there. As usual, we end our night with a marketplace segment where you can hold up your hand if you or your company is looking for somebody to work with you. The reason we do it this way around is so that if you are seated next to your manager, you don't have to say, hey, I'm looking for a job. That might not always be appreciated. And then it will be the end of the evening for us, and we'll all go home. Or you can talk outside a bit, but we'll go out of here. As Rob earlier mentioned, feel free to ask questions. Generally, we ask people to wait until a speaker is done before questions. This to prevent the usual thing of I'm answering your question on my next slide. If a speaker indicates differently, please do so. If you're watching online, you can ask questions in Slack or in the chat on YouTube. We'll keep an eye on those and ask the questions on your behalf. If you're in person, as mentioned, hold up your hand and we'll bring a mic. Of course, we couldn't do this without our sponsors, so I want to thank our lovely sponsors, our gold sponsor, Mental Group, and our silver sponsor, Civo. And we can't forget the lovely people who give us this venue, NAB. So thank you all to our sponsors. I mentioned Slack. You can join our Slack on that URL. It will give you the usual invite flow. We've got over 1,000 people on there. Depending on the day, month, year, it is more or less busy. If anything happens usually in the Sydney region, it can get quite busy because people are wondering what's going on. You can see all the different types of channels there as well. Aside from this, please get involved. We are always looking for speakers. Without somebody giving a talk, there isn't much around these meetups to do. So if you have a talk, if you're thinking of giving a talk, last month we gave a talk about, hey, how to give a talk, and why not? So if that inspired you, please reach out. We're not actively looking for sponsors this year anymore, but if you are looking for sponsors, if you are looking to sponsor us, please reach out to the man in the back there, who will be, it's Matt, who will be giving the second talk. And if you wish to volunteer, please reach out as well. We have some lovely volunteers already who've been helping out quite a bit today, so thank you for that. But there's always room for more. So, oh, that was still a long time. So, some events going on. Reinforce will be happening in a few months. This is AWS's security-focused event. It will be in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. If you're fortunate enough that your company will send you there, that's great. If you're within the first 5 years of your career, there is something called the All Builders Welcome Grant, which allows you, which you can apply for, and it's possible that way to get a fully paid trip to the event. Fully paid includes flights, hotel, tickets to the event. More details there you can find on the website. And if Dale was kind enough to post it in the Slack as well. So definitely have a look at that, because if you can go to something like that, especially on AWS's dime, that's awesome. A little bit closer to home, Community Day Brisbane. The AWS Community Day for Australia is back, and it's being held on the 15th of August this year. It's hosted in the Convention Center of Brisbane, and requests for speakers will go up within the next month or so. We're still working on that. Yes, I'm one of the organizers of that. So if you have questions, please reach out to me or Matt, actually, who is also helping with it. We are very much looking forward to this, because in August it will be nice weather over there. Other things, the AWS Programming and Tools meetup will meet here in, I think it's 2 weeks from now, to talk about blockchains. I'm sure we all remember blockchain. That was what was popular before Gen AI. It still has its use cases, of course. I'm not making fun of it. It's a hands-on workshop, so if you're interested, please come. I believe that was the only meetup so far that was announced. So with that, I will hand it over to people to read the news. So, thank you.
All right. We actually have a couple of things that have come to Melbourne. So we have the private link cross-region connectivity. So if you're using private link and you want to connect to another region, you can now do that from Melbourne. And Amazon API Gateway now has extra support there. As you can read, that support is now available in Melbourne.
So private link gives us more secure way to connect multiple AWS regions, and Amazon API Gateway enhancements give us more flexibility and security in API management. It's great news for AWS users in Melbourne.
All right. We have some new instance types available now in Sydney. The F2 if you're doing stuff with FPGAs. So yeah, S3 tables, that's been announced a bit recently. So that is now in Sydney. So
actually, these updates are great news for business people in Sydney. I can see this M7A and F2 instances will enhance the high computing tasks and the machine learning tasks and the S3 tables in Sydney. It's a great news, which will give us like structured data storage. And another thing is Nova understanding models, which will help the capabilities and like machine learning capabilities for the businesses and the business communication tools enhancements. And comes to the RDS, PostgreSQL, MySQL, MariaDB now support AMHE RAG database instances, which is a great news for better performance and scalable database. And there's a great news for serverless people who use Amazon Aurora that support RAG in the database instance.
all right, we have a few more things with databases. So if you're using IPv6, how many people are is anyone actually using IPv6 at the moment? Yeah, it's there if you're using Kinesis data streams. Firehose delivering into the S3 tables. Yeah, anything else you want to bring up?
Yeah, I think IPv6 in Kinesis data streams like compatible with the most modern networks. That's a great enhancement. And DataWare, Firehouse, and Amazon S3 tables like streamlining the data storage and analysis. And PostgreSQL, along with the Redshift, give us the advancements in the data processing and analytics. That's great announcements last month.
All right, containers. There are a few more options. So GPU optimized AMIs for Amazon Linux 2023. If you're using that with your ECS, give you some more performance boosts there. Pull through for your ECR. So if you're copying your ECR across accounts or regions, this gives you a way to integrate those. So
yeah, great announcements related to containers like image enhancement, security to the Kubernetes orchestration and containerization practices, and security to the containerized apps to ECR. That's great announcements in the container section last month.
Machine learning, yeah, there's there's a lot there, as always, always pushing stuff. There's actually been a few things for enhancements around Visual Studio Code for various things. So not just in here, but you'll see there's on a couple of pages things, new plugins and stuff working with Visual Studio Code. DeepSeek R1 available is fully managed. Yes, you could run it before, but you needed to deploy that onto your own EC2. Now it's just available as a managed LLM. Chatbot has been renamed as QDeveloper.
Yeah. Yeah, correct. And all these updates across Q, Bedrock, SageMaker, Unify Studio, like everything is like enhancing the business capabilities to communication tools, AI capability, data automation, and which is great news in the machine learning area. And like lots of updates are there last month in machine learning. Yeah, AWS is rocking in that machine learning. Yeah.
Couple of things in networking. So, new visual editor for your Route 53. If you're doing a lot of stuff with DNS, the traffic flow can help you with that. Just makes things a bit easier for management. Same with network firewall. You've now got flow management. So yeah, that's a couple of nice little announcements there.
Yeah, a cool feature to drag and drop in the visual editor. That's a really cool feature. And enhancements to security. Yeah.
Right, a couple of things with serverless. Yeah, as I said, the Lambda supporting CloudWatch logs live within your VS Code IDE. It's one of those. Amplify hosting. So the SKU protection really helps confirm that your front end is going to be going to the right back end if you've got a couple of versions there. So that's definitely a good thing.
Yeah. So when it comes to serverless and Amplify, I have first-hand experience. And previously, for the real-time data management, we have to use the, graphical schema and resolvers. But WebSockets in Amplify is a great deal for the developers. And also Lambda, along with the Visual Studio Code, the live VS Code IDE is like a game changer for real-time monitoring and debugging. Great announcement in the serverless area.
Cool. And onto storage. Yeah, again, like the S3 tables was sort of that big announcement, and obviously they're going in with a few extras there. Login latency for your SFTP transfers, if you're using that, that's good. Interesting thing, if you're using SnapLock with FSX NetApp on tap, so no longer charging for that license, so that's always nice.
Yeah. So here I'm like more obsessed with S3 updates. There are lots of S3 updates, like reducing the pricing for the tagging. That's cool. And along with that, the access grants are simplified, which is also a really good announcement related to S3, because like S3 is one of the services we use almost in every application. So any advancement in S3 is very useful for all the AWS users, I think.
Yeah, so your Dev and Ops, again, a few things with the VS Code. So Step Functions Workflow Studio, it's now in your VS Code IDE. So that's nice. Yeah, just a few enhancements there if you're doing stuff. Serverless LAN patterns are now available in the VS Code IDE. So yeah, few little nice enhancements there.
Yeah, and I'm an IAC enthusiast. I've used CloudFormation, CDK, and all those things, and Terraform also a little bit. But this particular announcement announcing Terraform support for AWS parallel computing is a really game changer for the people who are like cloud agnostic. And yeah, in the DevOps, it's a very a great enhancement in the Terraform. Also.
Yeah, and there are also quite a few enhancements around sort of code build, code pipeline there. So yeah. Some other stuff, if you're doing things with media, probably a bit more of a niche market, but your Elemental Media Connect now supports NDI outputs. So if you're doing that type of media work, the currency selection, probably more on the FinOps side of things. If you've got multiple things you need to deal with, multiple currencies, nice for those people that dealing with the billing side of your AWS.
Yeah. Another cool advancement in Secret Manager increases the API requests per second. That's a great advancement in the Secret Manager service. Yeah.
And I think that's probably it. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's it for your what's new, things that have come up in the last month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the new section. And that brings us then to our first speaker. I will unplug this laptop. Oh. While Sudarshan sets up, I will quickly introduce him. Sudarshan is a solution architect at AWS, specializing in data analytics and databases. Based in Melbourne, he works with AWS partners, customers in ANZ and the wider APAC region to help them build solutions using AWS data services to help them transform, modernize, and improve their business with the power of data. And as mentioned before, his talk is yep.
Good to go?
Cool.
Yeah, I'm good to go.
I will hand it over.
Thank you, Aryan, for the introduction. Good to be here. My name is Sudarshan. You can call me Sudi. Work for AWS, and one of the announcements you heard earlier today, if you were paying attention, SageMaker Unified Studio. Yay! It's finally here in Sydney. So I'm going to talk about that, why it's important, and I will try and make it relevant so that it's useful for you when you go back, because this is something different to what AWS has done in the past. I know we've seen all the announcements and services and so forth. There's tons of stuff that keeps happening, but this particular one I want to focus because it impacts people in different roles. So I'll try and see if that angle I can provide to you, but potentially for you, if you have not heard, this is part of what we're calling it as a new platform. It's called the SageMaker platform, so that's the first bit that's important. And the reason why, even sitting here today listening to all of the announcements, there's so much of change happening, it's difficult to keep up with all of this change. And there are so many services, I don't even know what the number is, it's like 200 plus, 250 maybe, I don't know. If anyone knows what those icons are, anyone wants to take a guess? Maybe let's do the one on the right, second row, last one on the right. Any guesses? QuickSight, okay. Anyone else? Close? OpenSearch. So it's confusing, right? So you have all of these different services, products, which is all fine, great. A lot of you are using some of these things, but it can get complicated. It's been about 15, 20 years and things have grown. So what's the common feedback, and this is very clear feedback from all engineers, developers, builders, even non-technical users, they want to simplify the ecosystem. That's fundamentally it, right? So they want simplification, but they don't want to let go of the stuff they already know. It's not like you're going to have S3 replaced with something else tomorrow. So that stuff will not change, but they want the same things in a simpler manner. So that's where at reInvent, if you recall, one of the key announcements that they made, it was on the keynote, was this new platform for which they chose an older brand name. So SageMaker is already there. Any ML engineers, anyone from ML side, ML ops, any AI engineers, SageMaker is probably not new to you. If you have used it before, good. If you haven't used it before, going forward you will hear this a lot more, because this kind of is an umbrella for all of the existing services that covers data, compute, security, and also BI going forward. So that's what is SageMaker. The reason I wanted to stress this part is it's a platform, not a service. So as a platform, it covers a layer, which is the studio, which I will talk about, but also it covers your underlying data, which is data lakes, S3, lake houses, and security built in. So if you're new to AWS or you're getting started, my advice would be to start here. You can go and read the 100, 200 services, that's great. But if you're looking to learn, this would probably be a good place to start, because this is the unifying platform and all of the services will be there, but essentially it makes your life easier if you're building stuff. You will still use those common tools like S3, you will still use databases, compute, whatever the instance types there are there, but this is the umbrella on which you will be building stuff. So if you're an engineer, your interaction would probably be through this platform, and specifically you will be interacting through this unified studio interface. So this is the layer that we expect AWS users to be actually building stuff. So if you're a hardcore cloud engineer, if you're a data engineer, if you're an ML engineer, this will be your interface going forward. You can still use all your familiar tools, IDEs if you want to, but you will see integrations with that. So VS Code is a good example. VS Code is very popular, but VS Code is also available with SageMaker. So you can use the same editor interface within the studio. So this is going to cut across different roles. That's why this is important. So wherever your role is in the cloud space, this is going to cover all of that. Right now there are 4 capabilities that's available in Sydney. So it launched earlier in March in Sydney, not yet there in Melbourne, but you can do SQL analytics if you're a data analyst who's primarily working on SQL. If you're a big data engineer, it covers existing services like EMR, Glue, ETL. If you are into model training and building or app building, all of those services are now covered. And like I said, BI is also going to come soon. So if you are a BI developer, you're building reports and dashboards for your organization, that's also coming. So this is going to cover, again you can see different roles getting covered here, and the IDE will make it very simple for you to use, because depending on what you want to do, you have a workflow that's there. So that workflow is also seamless because it will cut across all of the data that's there. So which means if you are somebody who is managing cloud for your organization, you would be able to put in your governance and security policies so that data access is secure. Not just data, with AI now even the model governance, so which model should be used by my organization, you can govern that. If you don't want a specific model to be made available to your teams, you can do all of that governance, you can lock it down, and you can choose whatever is your favorite instance type, family, whatever you want to use. So it will cut across everything now. So both data, your code assets, models, and compute. So yeah, it's a happy day. So you can do all of that in a simple manner. And for those who are building stuff, nobody builds things in silo. You're probably working as part of a larger team. So that experience of collaborating is built into the studio. The way it will work is it's a standard project interface. You have a Git repository, which means anything that you do is available to the rest of the project members through Git. So if you check in a SQL script, your big data engineer can pick it up to run and train a model. It's all collaborative, right? So that experience is seamless. So you have all of that built in. You don't have to set it up. It is a standard Git repository. It's not something new. Code commit is not there anymore. So it's a standard Git repo. So you can use your favorite Git hoster to integrate with Unified Studio. So example, and lastly, you can't be very far from an AI assistant. Now even the AI assistant is built into the studio. So Q, the developer version of Q is a software developer assistant mainly for you to build stuff. So you can, the example here is asking Q to write SQL code, SQL queries. And similarly, you will be able to ask it to do write Python code, ask it to refactor code, ask it to debug code. So that experience of Q is built into the studio, which means top right hand corner, if you can see that purple icon there, every time you click on it, it is context aware. So depending on what you are doing in the studio, it is able to understand that context. So Q developer is what is the assistant that's built in. So hopefully that simplifies your development experience, right? So that's the goodies that comes with Unified Studio. What else? Yes, my favorite feature that I want to share of all the features that I covered is that I don't need to log into the AWS console anymore. So you can expose this studio to your organization users irrespective of whether they are in IT or outside of IT teams. They don't need an AWS account access. So think about your business analyst user who wants access to the latest sales data but end up having access to the AWS account, then they have access to the database or a data warehouse. It's a security nightmare, right? So straight off, no AWS account access, just log into the studio, and if they have access to any project, they will see it, otherwise they see nothing. So it's a blank access, very simple. It is meant for both engineers and business users. So single sign-on integration is there. So you can integrate it with your whatever your organization IDP is. If it is like Ping or Okta, you can enable that IDP through IAM Identity Center, and then your users can just use your corporate login to log into the studio directly. So that's a very nice feature. Finally, business users don't need console access. And once you are on the studio, you will see different workflows, I call it. So if you are just wanting to explore what data is available within your organization, you would be spending time in your data catalog. If you want to build generative AI applications, you want to explore things, create like a chatbot or upload some images and interact with models, you would do that in the GenAI playground. And similarly, there are workflows for SQL analytics if you want to write or query your data warehouses or databases. And lastly, your notebook experience is the last leg. So I mentioned about project experience. This is a good example where you have a sample project where you have the project members. So it's single sign-on. So you just add, if somebody joins your team, you just add them to the project. If they leave the team, you remove them from the project. It's as simple. And then within the project, a project owner can manage what compute is used in that project. So if you want to say this project is a high priority one, give it more compute resources, maybe that needs a 4x large instance to run stuff. And then you have a dev project where you just need to have serverless. When they use it, you pay for it, otherwise you don't want to pay for it. So you can do all of those customizations. And onboarding, offboarding is easy. And depending on the file, two examples there. One is a Jupyter notebook file, the last one, and the other one is a SQL notebook file. So if you click on that, it will open up the relevant editor. So one will launch a SQL query editor, the other one will open up a Jupyter notebook editor. Again, once you are there, whatever you are doing today, it's the same experience that you will have. You can do the same things. One thing to note, you can see that there is a repository integration there. That's what I mentioned by Git integration. So throughout this project, whatever code you build, you check in, you have that committed to Git. And if you want to, you can use Q for assistance. So here are some of the tools that's available today in Sydney. You can use all of these capabilities which is generally available in Studio. The way this is broken down is you have your machine learning and generative AI workflows at the bottom. You've got your data workflows, and then you've got ETL workflows, which is the orchestration part. And for anything else that you want to do, where you want a notebook, it's a Jupyter Lab. It's exactly Jupyter Lab notebook. It's not any different. So you can have that familiar experience. If you are a big data engineer or Python developer, you would be used to that. It's the same experience. Query editor example, you can choose your engine when you execute SQL queries. If you want to use serverless, you can use Athena. If you want to use like a traditional relational data warehouse, you can choose Redshift engine. You can mix and match from different sources. It simplifies it, because today if you were to use editors, there are 4 editors that I know of: Redshift editor, Glue editor, Athena query editor, and I probably missed one more. There are 4 editors. Each one looks different, each one behaves different. This simplifies it because it's just one editor. You just change the engine and off you go. Similarly with notebooks, you can choose your engine, you can choose your environment, and you can have different, like I said, you can have different notebook instances provisioned for different projects and requirements. So again, you can customize it. My favorite feature here is you can choose your engine at a cell level. So you can have one cell within the same notebook run in a different engine, then I can switch the second cell to another engine, which I don't know if there anything else in the market is available that does that today. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's pretty cool. Similarly with machine learning, you can have most of the features of Bedrock are there. I would say about 80%. So you can monitor training jobs. You can't create the training jobs within the UI yet, but I'm sure that will be added at some point. But you can do all of that through code, right? So you can do that through your notebooks and then monitor the jobs. Think about operations engineers, people who are more on the ops side. They can have the same project and monitor things that's been built in the project. So again, this will cover the IDE as well. So the Bedrock IDE is now within the studio. So if you want to build a chat agent, or if you want to interact, upload an image and interact or test stuff, you can do that again within the studio. If you want to expose this to your business users, you can choose to do so if you want to, without giving them access to the Bedrock console. That's another benefit of having a studio that's delinked from the console. Q again, so the one thing with Q I should call out, it not just helping you write code or refactor code. With Q you can actually ask questions on data as well. So Q is now not just for software coding, it's also for interacting with data. So you can go and ask Q, here are 20 data sets that I have built. Tell me which of the data sets has this particular information that you're looking for. So in natural language, you can ask it to query your data sources and get you information. If you are building data sets, then you can supplement that with Q. If you build, let's say, a table with 30 fields, based on the column name, you can ask Q to generate metadata text and put it into that table. So somebody who's searching for the tomorrow will be able to use that to search on the data. So not just for coding, even for interacting with data, you can use Q. So that's a bonus for anyone on the data side. And so essentially, this is where I feel, personal opinion, the different tools and services will start to get combined. That's why I said it's a platform, not a service. So you can have a single platform with different projects for different teams, and different tools, different engines, different editors, but they are all working on a single platform. And of course, governance is built in so that it's easier for your organizations to keep things secure, especially with AI. You want to think about security. So this makes it easier for them. So one tool for all of your needs. As long as you're interacting with data to do stuff, I think this makes a lot of sense. I quickly touch upon this, couple of key points. How do you set up? So projects is where you would be interacting with, but if you were doing this as an administrator for your organizations, you would need to set up 2 more things, which is your blueprint and your profile. That's the base foundation. So once you have that URL, you will say in this URL, these are all the different blueprints that somebody can deploy. So this is an admin role. So whoever is admin will be setting this up. The rest of the users would be dealing with projects. So you will set up this. Blueprints basically is your way to control what is available to the project. So if your organization says everything should be serverless, if that is an organization policy, I'm just taking an example. In your blueprint as an administrator, you will lock down all of the instances which are provisioned. only the serverless services you will enable. So that level of detail you can set up. That's why I said it's an admin role. And based on that blueprint, you create a project profile. You will say, this is my, I don't know, marketing team's project profile. So when they deploy it, you know exactly what they have deployed. No surprises. They're not going to provision a 16x large instance and leave it running for a week. You can control all of that at the project profile. So that's one thing. And this is another thing as an admin you would set up. This is what gives you that URL I spoke about. So as an admin, you will do this one-time setup. Like I said, you can do single sign-on integration. This is the first step. You will set it up, you will get a URL, and that URL is what you would pass on to your rest of the organization to log in. So this is also an admin role. Someone who's an admin would be doing this setup and then sharing it with the organization. So example here, it can be as complicated as you want it to be, but very simply said, if you have a simple organization and you have different departments and they have child departments. So you would set up probably a root domain, or you can say every department gets their own URL. So it really depends how you want to set it up. If you want to start simple, start with one domain, one project, and see how we go. You can always create many of these later on. You can also have child domains, as you can see in this example. So at some point later you decided, okay, this fits in as part of another organization, you can add it as a child one. Just to give you an example, so the delineation is between the console and the URL. So everything here is URL. That admin owner who's setting up the domain would be doing it on the AWS console. There is no support for CloudFormation or CDK yet. So yeah, so I won't go into the details, but if you want more details, I'll be around. You can chat. So that's about how you set up each of these. And like I said, the data interaction through queue, this is very, very useful. So this is an example of all of my data assets that's published, and I can go and say combine all of these and create a product and publish it. So somebody from the business can go look up information from that product and they can find this data set. Whether you want to make it publicly available within the organization or you want to say somebody needs to approve, you can set up those workflows as well. So lastly, why I think this is important, I kind of hinted that this is simplifying the ecosystem. Potentially the way the tools are, or this domain is evolving, it will probably mean some of the roles will start to get converged. So if you are a hardcore data person or if you are a hardcore ML engineer, at some point this might combine because the tool sets and the services are combining. So just think about where you want to spend time in future. Potentially some of these roles might combine. You might not have a dedicated data analyst or a data engineer or an ML engineer. You might have a blended role and someone who's across some of these tools, multiple of these tools. So that's my personal opinion. I obviously can't predict the future. I can ask my favorite chat assistant, but I don't think I'll get the right answer. So with that, I'll wrap up. If you want to know more on this particular topic, just on data, we've just started this year. We run once in 2 months. So if you want more details, if you're a data geek, feel free to join us. Our events will run once in 2 months, and we don't have a fixed place yet, but we'll find sponsors for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Hey, Sudhi. Hello. Hey, Sudhi. Right here.
Oh.
How you doing? I remember speaking to you at the AWS office as well.
Yep.
With this one, thank you for the update on Amazon Q and how it's combining everything and bringing everything together and the data exploration that you can do within it.
Yep.
Is there any kind of data privacy concerns that you'd have regarding exploration of data and publishing it, like all the data products and the data tables that you see there?
Yep.
Are there any privacy concerns that you've kind of picked up?
100%. That's why when you set it up, the first thing that you do is you set up the domains, the organization boundary, you will define it. So everything is within that domain boundary. So if you say this data asset is published here, it's inside that domain. It doesn't leave that domain. So if you know that this is part of my finance team, you've defined that boundary, it's within that boundary. And even inside that boundary, like I mentioned, you can choose to have which assets are made public, which are private, and you can build those workflows. So that screenshot I showed you, when you go through that workflow and say publish this one to my domain, it will ask you who is the owner of that, and you can actually set up approval workflows as well. So if a user goes and looks for it, all they will see is the metadata. So if you say finance, give me last 12 months of data, you will see that asset or a product show up, but they can't actually do anything with it. All they can see is if you choose to make it private, they will go and request for approvals, and it will come to you as a data producer, and knowing the person, knowing the justification, you can decide to make it available. So data privacy important, but you can control it, and it doesn't leave that boundary.
Any other questions? No? Then thank you again.
Thank you.
Sweet. And I'll introduce our next speaker, who actually wrote an intro this time in his form. Matt is the guy always looking for simpler, faster, easier ways to get things done. From automating timesheets, slide deck creations, and video generation, Matt's always on the lookout for ways that AI can be used to be more lazy. Efficient.
Yeah. More efficient, not necessarily lazy, depending on who you talk to. Let's see if we can make this work. Slideshow. Okay. You should.
Just plug in directly.
Yeah, yeah. That would make life much easier, wouldn't it? Sweet, awesome. Okay, easy done. Right, for those of you who don't know me, Matt, come talk to me if you want to sponsor, present, anything like that. But today, Q, Bedrock, and agentic programming, all those magical buzzwords that you've been hearing and sick of hearing about. I thought I'd give you a little bit more because, like, you know, like when you're sick of something, nothing beats hearing more about it. Who am I? Principal consultant, Mantel Group, all around tinkerer. I probably should say ex-beer drinker, but you know, either way. Currently spending my time, as my intro sort of said, looking at more ways to automate my job so that I can spend more time building robots, because robots are cool and fun and only sometimes annoying when things catch on fire. If you are interested in robotics, quick call out, I am presenting at NDC Melbourne at the end of next month. So if you want to hear about the whole robotics journey and how my R2-D2 kind of caught fire, come along and we'll have a chat. The goal of today's session is sort of twofold. One is to teach you all about using AI to develop things faster. But I thought to make things a little bit more interesting, let's see if we can build a number guessing game and get it deployed in AWS in less than 30 minutes. So we'll basically build a little game, guess a number between 1 and 100. The computer will come back and say you're too high, you're too low, and we'll have some kind of high score board and sort of see how we go. So with that, there are a couple of ways that we can go about doing this. And a lot of people, when they're sort of starting off with their AI journey, will probably go to something like Claude or ChatGPT or one of those sorts of things and say, I want to build a game. And that's going to come back and give us a bunch of details and probably a whole bunch of code that we can copy and paste, and we'll have mixed level of success with that. So we could probably do a little bit better. And after all, this is kind of the AWS user group, so using Claude's probably not a particularly relevant topic for today. So in that case, we could probably go to something like a good old VS Code, because apparently that's the only IDE that exists anymore. And we can sort of come in here and we can say, well, the first thing we're going to need is we're going to need an index.html so that we have got some form of web page, and we can use, well, in this case I've got Amazon Q Developer installed, but it could be Copilot, it could be, you know, insert tool of choice here, and say I want to, whoops, to build a web page that hosts a number guessing game where the user guesses a number between 1 and 100. And it can go away and do a little bit of magic and spit us back a, well, it's a HTML page, so like, I guess from that point of view it kind of does what's on the tin. You probably wouldn't normally have your CSS embedded in your index.html. You probably wouldn't necessarily have it embedded in line like that. But, you know, at the end of the day, it is technically a page, and if I looked at that, it probably, yeah, it would actually kind of, sort of, you know, do what we want. Kind of cool. But what if we want, you know, high scores, we want some kind of back end, we want, you know, all of those sorts of bits and pieces. So we could probably do a little bit better than this as well. And that's where we start getting into some of the more advanced options of doing things. So, plus I kind of just cheated a little bit using Amazon Q Developer and haven't actually really showed you how to do things. So I think what we'll do for this one, because again, this is the AWS user group, we can go ahead and use Q Developer, and we'll do some agentic programming-esque type things. So what we can do is we can go across into our AWS account. If you haven't anybody played with Q Developer? Anybody played with the Q suite of products in general? Q Business? No, a little bit, okay. There are a bunch of products. They are the Q suite of products. The one we are interested in today is Amazon Q Developer. There's a lot of things that come under the Q Developer banner now. If you think back, there was, what was it, Code Whisperer is now under Q Developer. There was, is it AWS Chatbot or Amazon Chatbot? It was AWS Chatbot. That's now under the Q Developer banner as well. Q Developer is your coding assistant sort of powerhouse, which, as we also just saw, is also available in things like Unified Studio and all of those sorts of bits and pieces. So we can go ahead and say we want some of that, and give me some Q Developer, please. And it's going to tell me that I need an email address, so I will type in the ever efficient, and my name is Matt, and my surname, and we can click continue, and it says unable to create user because the organization manager account is not allowed to do that in instances because I didn't test. That's the one part of this demo that I didn't test, but that's okay, because it would not be a demo if things did not break. So we go back to the one that I built previously, because that's okay. So we can go here and we can click, and it's going to tell me that I need to jump into the Sydney region because, you know, we didn't already do that. And if I click there, because I've already got a user, it's going to come up and tell me that I'm going to need to add a user. In this case, it's not asking me to give my details because I've already given it my details. Effectively, what it's gone ahead and done in the background is created you an IAM Identity Center implementation, because everybody wants an Identity Center implementation in their AWS account. That is how it assigns licenses to use Q Developer. You'll notice there's a trend in AWS land at the moment. They are moving more and more of these sorts of services into Identity Center to enable you to give users access to this sort of stuff without making them log into the console. It is nice and cool. It is, you know, fantastic. And now that they actually support cross-region goodness for a number of these things, that actually makes life somewhat usable. So we have a subscription now. If we go ahead and look at our users, we can see that we've subscribed Matt a license. He's got an Amazon Q Developer Pro license. We can then go across into our VS Code instance. You will see that I already have my Amazon Q extension installed because I didn't want to, bore you with the detail, with the having to wait for that to do its install thing. And then when we install that, we just need to give it a, now can I sign out? I can sign out. So let me sign out of this. And this is the kind of window that you're presented with the first time you open up the extension. Do we want to use a free license? Do we want to use a pro license? The free license is actually pretty good, especially if you're just getting started in this sort of thing. If you haven't yet played with QDeveloper or you haven't gone down the whole assisted AI development thing, you want to get into some vibe coding because that's a thing, give the free version a shot because, not that the pro version's expensive. I think it's only like $30 or something, but like free beats 30. Especially if you're just giving it a whirl. You may decide that this isn't for you, you want to do something else, that's fine. But we're going to use a pro license. It's going to ask me for a Identity Center URL, which I don't know off the top of my head because why would I? And that's going to tell me that I'm in somewhere. Dun, dun, dun. I did have it up before, but that's really annoying, isn't it? So we have to go back here, settings. It was in here somewhere. We just do it the other way. Just go IAM Identity Center. It's going to be tough for us to hit that 30-minute mark if I need to keep on looking for things, but that's okay. Here we go. So that's the bit that I want. I want my URL. And we need to set that to the Sydney region. So we go into Sydney, do our little continue thing. It wants to open up in the browser so that it can authenticate me. And we wait because, connecting to the internet via your phone in your pocket in the middle of a building in the middle of Melbourne, the internet's always like super fast. I'm obviously already logged into that account because I was just browsing. So we can go ahead and accept that. And if we go back into our VS Code instance, voila, we are now logged in and everything's all nice and happy. So from here, we can actually start doing things. If you've played with GitHub Copilot or anything like that, similar deal, you log in, you give it your GitHub details, you pretty much land at this point. So we have a Q developer license. We can now actually start telling it to do things. We're in a blank, empty VS Code project, so there's no existing material or anything like that. So why don't we go ahead and give it a prompt and we can get it to start building us something. So we're going to start off by telling it that we want to develop something. This is going to develop a bunch of code for, and we'll make that a little bit bigger so that people can actually see what we're doing. Can people see that? Yes? Cool, awesome, fantastic. So we're just going to, excuse me, I'm just going to whack in some code here. So we need to build a very simple end-to-end web application that includes all of the code and documentation we'd need to successfully be able to deploy into production. The application is going to be a simple guessing game where a user visits the web page and is asked to guess a number between 1 and 100. The user can then enter their guess into the text box and click the guess button. The app will then come back and tell the user if their guess was too high or too low and let them guess again. This will repeat until the user successfully guesses the correct number. When the user guesses the correct number, some form of celebration animation should occur and the app should ask for the user to enter their name to go onto the scoreboard. The user should then be able to ask, asked if they wish to play again. The website should be hosted in an S3 bucket and have all the additional features enabled to allow it to host the public site. The compute should all be done using serverless technology and the score should be recorded in a DynamoDB table. Right? That's our prompt. That's what we're going to ask Amazon Q Developer to go ahead and build for us, and we're going to see how that goes. So it's gone ahead and gone, sweet, all right, after I provide the task, I'm going to do a bunch of things for you. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start generating some code. This is going to take a couple of minutes and we'll see how it sort of fares. I ran this earlier today from home and it took sort of 5-8 minutes. Let's see how fast it goes now. Basically what it's doing is, in the background, it's actually looking at that prompt and then breaking it down into a series of steps that it's going to need to take in order to get from where the project currently is, which is an empty folder, to the point where it actually ticks off all of the things that I've gone and asked for. This obviously requires it to do a number of things in the background, which it's currently going, and in a minute it should sort of come up and say, right, I've thought about it and now I'm going to start doing a bunch of things. This demo is obviously not pushing this sort of stuff to the brink. This is a pretty simple demo, but 30 minutes is 30 minutes, right? So I didn't want to dive too deep with this, but as we sort of walk through this, I will call out a couple of things that you might also be hearing around things like MCPs and agents and all of those other buzzwords, so that you can sort of understand how that plays into this bigger picture, because it all aligns to what's going on the screen right now. So what we can see is, it's going to share updates here as I work on this, and it's going to start creating some files in a minute. Obviously, it's not going to review any files just yet because there aren't any that actually exist. So it's probably going to start at creating files. And if we give it another moment, it's probably going to work out that the first thing it's going to need to do is start creating, a HTML file, probably, if I had to guess, because I didn't tell it what code to write it in. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's probably going to give me some JavaScript, because it seems to always give back JavaScript, even, it really doesn't seem to like Python particularly well, particularly if you ask it to write Python CDK code. It really does not seem to like doing that. Almost as if it doesn't want you to do that. It wants you to use TypeScript, but yeah. You can tell it, in your prompt, turn around and say, give me Python code, and it will come back and give you Python code, or Go, or Rust, or any of those sorts of things. But by default, if you don't define, it's typically going to come back with JavaScript and that sort of stuff. Question?
Yes, Matt. I understand for the application files, it's generating the source code.
Yes.
For the infrastructure, what artifacts is it generating? Does it actually
We will get to that bit in a minute, because I have a sneaking suspicion I know exactly what it's going to do, but we will wait and see. I actually think it's going to write us a Terraform file that it's then going to ask us to run, but we shall wait and see. But what it has done is it sat there and gone, all right, we need to create several files to implement the web application. The front end files, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, told you I was going to write JavaScript, for the game interface, the AWS infrastructure code, CloudFormation, or SAM for S3. There you go. API Gateway, Lambda, DynamoDB, backend Lambda function code for the game logic, and documentation files. I'll start by creating the project structure. So it's gone ahead and started creating the files. So it's created the index.html, the CSS file, the JavaScript, template.yaml. So it looks like it is just doing standard CloudFormation. There you go. It's created the Lambda file, and it's pulled together a README. It doesn't think it's quite done yet, so we'll give it another couple of moments. But it's doing its thing. Yes?
So when you give feedback to make changes, does it take the same time, or is it faster?
It will be. It is faster, but then it will get slower again the bigger the project gets. It seems, from the experience that I've had with this, when you first tell it to build something out, it does seem to take a while. I think, not a machine learning engineer, so take this with a grain of salt, but I think it's because there are so many paths for it to take to get from nowhere to somewhere that there's a lot of pick your own adventure kind of thing going on in the background.
And one of the things as well for creating documentation is, of course, it can reference documentation it creates itself.
Yeah.
It goes back and reads the context later.
Yeah. Once it's got that, it's a lot more defined. So while it still needs to go back and look at the files to work out what's already there, because you may have gone and changed them manually, the total number of viable options is reduced. And then, as Stephen said, it's got the README that it can refer to and some other context that it can pull in that seems to make it go a little bit faster. as you then start adding more and more code and the options start increasing again, it does seem to slow down a little bit. Yeah, I haven't yet gotten to the point where it becomes so large that it gets sad and stops working or starts iterating on itself, but I have heard colleagues run into that sort of problem. But at that point, I think they were, yeah, a pretty big project at that point.
Just hang on a second.
Yep.
Does it save the context? So if you shut down this now and get to this tomorrow, can you
I
continue?
don't think so, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not. Just the way that it works makes me think that it probably won't do that. But let me find out for sure on that one. I might post an update
So
in the
you
Slack.
have to build the whole project,
Yeah,
in one
again.
day.
Yeah, but yeah, let me double check. Let me get the answer to that one, and I'll kick it back in the Slack channel.
Hang on. Do you guys not remember the request I gave you at the start?
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have.
What's the advantage of using the Pro on Amazon Q opposed to the free?
Limits are one thing. There's some more things around the documentation, around some testing capability. There are some more quota bits, and there's some more stuff which, again, I will take offline and I'll post in our Slack after the fact. I don't want to give you the wrong information.
Hello. You said at the start that you say /dev and then you give the prompt.
Yep.
What are the other options?
So there are a bunch of other options. There is, and I will get to those. I will walk through those towards the end. But there's test, there's doc, there's a couple of others. But what it's done now is it has actually decided that it's done. So it's gone and it thinks it's created all the files. It's happy with its output. Would you like me to add the code to your project, provide feedback? You know what, I'm going to accept all those changes. And if we actually go and have a look now, do I want a dev file? No, I don't think I want a dev file right now. So we will go and we'll have a look, and we'll close that one for the minute, and let's have a look at our HTML, our index.html. So here we go. So this looks pretty similar to the last one, except there is no CSS, which yay, because we want that in a separate file. So we can see that it's gone and created a style.css. We've got a script.js, which is obviously our logic. That's all easy enough. We've got a CloudFormation document here, which is, what are we creating? We're creating an S3 bucket policy, DynamoDB table, serverless function with an event handle, and we're outputting the website URL, which will actually be handy for us to know. And we've got our Lambda function, which is cracking some SADs because I don't have, the requirements installed, but that's okay. So we've got get score, handle, we've got save score. So we've got all the basic sort of functionality that we want in our Lambda function, easy done. And we've got a README, yay, which says, if we sort of close that out and let's have a look at the nice pretty, simple web numbers game, blah, 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 blah. Application uses the following services: S3 API gateway for the REST endpoint, Lambda, and DynamoDB. Install SAM, build and deploy using the back end, and this is sort of the instructions that we've got. Absolutely fantastic. Now, of course, it's gone and used SAM because when I tested it this afternoon, it told me, it decided that it wanted to use Terraform. So Terraform is what I made sure that I had installed and working on this machine. So let's see if I have SAM installed, because I probably do not. I do, look at that, awesome, yay. All right, so install SAM CLI. So we've done that. We can do SAM build. Cool, SAM deploy guided. All right. Note that API gateway endpoint URL for this development outputs. Okay, gotcha. So we can say we're going to call this guessing game. Sure, deploy it in Sydney. No, we don't want to deploy it to confirm the changes. Yeah, sure, go ahead and create the roles. No, we don't want to disable rollback. Scores function has no authentication. Is this okay? Yeah, sure. What's the worst thing that can happen if we deploy an API that doesn't have authentication? Like, This is kind of sort of also the problem with AI is it isn't necessarily a security expert, it isn't necessarily an architectural expert, so while this may very well work, it may not necessarily be something you want to deploy into production, and we've gone ahead and failed already. No good. Why did it fail? Bucket cannot something. So this is the problem when you're zoomed in so much, you can't actually go ahead and read the error code. Bucket cannot have ACL set with object ownership bucket owner enforced setting. Oh, you fail, queue. Oh, no good. Failed to create. Okay, so we can go back to our queue and we can say, all right, we can go ahead and we can say, let's copy that. And we can say, where are we? When I try to run my code, I get the following message. Actually, why don't we do dev on that as well? And we'll just neaten that up a little bit. Okay, Setting. Okay, and we will see what that comes back with. So what's going to happen this time is slightly different thing. We'll find out the answer to the first question, which was when we iterate on this, does it go faster? But also this time it's actually going to have some context that it can pull from the project, because now we actually have source code. It can actually go ahead and look at the files that we've currently got and all of those sorts of things. This is where we start getting into the conversations around things like agents and model context protocol and MCPs and all of these sorts of fun new things, because the idea here is that we can actually teach our AI agents or bots, call them what you will, how to interact with different things. So right now, Amazon Q, the Q developer extension, is interacting with files that I have on my local machine. It's reading, you know, the JSON, it's reading the HTML, it's reading the CSS. But if we go ahead and build an interface to, say, a local database that I have on my machine, then we can actually give Amazon Q or another agent, if you're using something like Klein or any of the other tools available, Copilot, the ability to interact directly with the SQL database that you have on your local machine. Or you might want to interface with a way to, let's say you want it to interface with, what would a good thing be? Draw.io, right? So I don't want you to just write my README file. I also want you to interface with Draw.io and give me the diagram as well. So we can build agents and interfaces, or servers, depending on which model and vendor you're talking to, depends on exactly what word they use, interfaces into these different things so that we give our tools more capability to interact with more things. Some of you may have heard the Sonnet 3.7 stuff around being able to interact, or having computer use capability, and being able to interact with the browser and being able to interact with other applications on your machine. Similar concept here. We have the ability to teach it how to interact with these things, so we can actually go and have it browse the web for us, talk to Perplexity or, you know, Midjourney or any of those sorts of things. So what's it gone and done here? It says the error message indicates an S3 bucket configuration issue relating to the object ownership exception. I'll examine the template file. I'll examine the S3 bucket configuration in the template YAML settings API causing the error. The issue is in template.yaml, where the S3 bucket is configured with access control public read. Since the bucket has ownership enforced settings for object ownership, we need to remove the ACL configuration and update the bucket policy instead. I've updated the bucket configuration to use object writer instead of bucket owner enforced and remove the ACL setting. This should resolve the object ownership conflict while still allowing public access through bucket policy. So it's gone ahead and updated our template.yaml. We can actually go ahead and see what it's done. So it's gone and replaced the access control public read with a configuration block. It's also put the ownership controls in there, and we can go ahead and say, sure, if you think that's going to solve the problem and give us what we want, then let's go for it. So we can then go ahead and we can just say SAM deploy guided again, and we'll say number guessing game, yes, yes. Confirm changes, no. SAM CLI, yes. Rollback, no. Authentication, yes, that's fine, yes, that's fine. Save to the argument, SAM, yes, use my default, because default's always great. And we can see whether or not we go back that time, and it says failed because rollback complete state on my CloudFormation. So that's actually a pretty easy one to fix. We can go ahead and do that real quickly. How are we going for time? We've got, what, 5, 7 minutes left on our 30 minutes? We're getting close. So we'll see how we go. Yep, rollback complete. So we can go ahead and we can just delete that stack while everybody reads what other CloudFormation stacks I've got running in my account. The answer to that is I have absolutely no idea. Why would I? It's only my account. Could probably take guided off at this point because we actually already have the configuration file, so we probably don't need to be answering those questions every time, but that's okay. So waiting for the changes to be created. This is doing the SAM thing. If you've heard any of my other talks, you'll know that I'm somewhat of a SAM fan. Oh, fail again, but this time we're failing on the DynamoDB table. No, we're not. We're still failing on the, look at that. That's no good. There you go. See, these things do not always work the way that you want them to work. Yes?
So, it was obviously very good at creating a lot of stuff very quickly.
It is.
In terms of troubleshooting, do you think you could troubleshoot it faster than Q if you were just doing it completely by hand?
I also didn't pay attention and wait for the microphone. To go back over that, so obviously it created a lot of stuff really quickly. That was good.
Yes.
If you went back and troubleshooted the CloudFormation by hand, do you think you'd be able to do that faster than waiting for Q to go through and iterate over it and potentially making the same mistake again?
Depends on what we're looking at. In this particular instance, I would say it's probably 50-50. Purely and simply because I don't do a lot of S3 configuration, so knowing the exact intricacies of CloudFormation configuration of an S3 bucket, we're probably going to be about even. But as a general rule of thumb, I would say if you're running in common territory, so things that most people do most of the time, the agent's going to win probably 95 times out of 100. And the reason for that is the training data that's been used to train the model up is more prevalent. So therefore, when it does its statistical modeling in the back end and does its machine learning thing, those common scenarios are going to surface up. It's going to get a higher rating, which means it's going to return that code more likely. If we loop back to what I was talking about before around CDK and Python and QDeveloper not being particularly good at that, that's just because sane people don't do CDK in Python. So there aren't as many.
Excuse me, sir?
Look, I do, but I've long ago stopped calling myself a sane individual. There aren't as many examples. Even if you look at the AWS documentation on CDK Python versus CDK TypeScript, you'll notice a vast difference. So that has an impact on the model and the quality of the content that the model will return. So in that instance, I would absolutely say that I'd be able to beat Q more often than not. But for something like this, as I say, we're probably 50-50. When it comes to JavaScript, I suck at JavaScript, so it's going to beat me 99 times out of 100. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. One of the things, and this is kind of the key point of this conversation, and we won't bother iterating on this because it's kind of pointless. Because the actual point of this is to show you that yes, these tools are fantastic, and look, this is a pretty simple demo, this is a pretty simple example, and how long would it take a seasoned software developer to smash together a HTML page, a CSS page, and a single Lambda function? Not particularly long. Could they do it in less than the 9 minutes that it took the agent? Yeah, maybe, maybe not. They'd have to go get a cup of coffee first, so probably not. But this is a good way to get started, right? Things like TypeScript, JavaScript, this is great because I suck at that sort of stuff, but this can sort of help me along and get me most of the way to where I need to be. And that's the thing. This isn't a replacement for software developers. This isn't a replacement for the knowledge. It isn't a replacement for the design decisions or the curating or anything like that. It's just a tool. It's a tool that we can use to make ourselves more efficient, to give ourselves that little bit of additional help, to get us to where we need to go. You should give them a shot, give it a try. Whether or not it's Q Developer, whether or not it's Copilot or Klein and you want to do your own thing, it doesn't really matter, but I highly advise everybody go away and look at what's available in the AI agent space, because there will be things that you can leverage, there will be things that you can take away and apply to your own job. If you really get into the weeds about this sort of stuff, where you can go, and this was sort of the last point that I sort of wanted to lean on, Q Developer is great, Q Developer is fantastic, it's a really good way to get up and running with this sort of stuff. But at some point in time, you may start running into limitations, particularly when you want to start going down the MCPs and building your own agents and doing all of those sort of cool, fun things. If you get to that point, Bedrock starts becoming your best friend, right? Bedrock gives you the ability to run other models in your AWS environment, and then looping in something like, so if we go Klein is just another VS Code extension. I've got RuCode. RuCode is kind of like the insiders or the preview build of Klein. But basically what we can say is, and we go, there should be an unhide button here somewhere, RuCode. It is the same thing, all right? So we can go ahead and we can say we want to run on Bedrock. We give it an AWS profile, which we'll say is the default. And we can say we want to run in US East 1, and we want to run, against Claude, 3.7 Sonnet. Let's go. And it's the same thing, right? So we can go. So in this instance, it's code as opposed to dev, but you kind of get used to that. And it's the same thing. So we can go in and put the same prompt in, and it's going to do the same thing. It's going to use a different model, give us back a slightly different response. But this then lets you start doing other bits and pieces and all that sort of stuff. The downside to that is obviously you're running the model. So Q Developer is $30. I think it's $30 US per month for the license. It's going to cost you $30 US a month. Right. If you run something like Claude Sonnet 3.7 in Bedrock, it's going to cost you, however much you used it times whatever the cost of 3.7 Sonnet is currently. If you aren't caching your responses, if you smash it a lot, if you accidentally put 7,000 tokens into your context window and then repeatedly query it, it's going to cost you a lot of money. All right? So that's where billing alerts and all of those sorts of things come into play, which is why I recommend that everybody start with something like Q Developer first, because you've got some guardrails in place. Give it a shot, see whether or not it's useful for you, and then you can always expand out and start using the additional tools after the fact. But that's kind of it. Happy to talk to people after the fact if we want to have another session on using MCPs and how you can tie into things like the pricing calculator so that you can get your, you can actually have it cost up the solution before you deploy it into production so that it doesn't just look good in the code editor, but actually, you're not going to send the company bankrupt in the meantime. Or you can run things against config and that sort of stuff. Happy to come back. We can do another session on that one. Any other questions, queries, concerns before we close out? As I say, happy to have a chat after the meetup if anybody's got any other questions. Otherwise, cool. Have fun.
Thank you, Matt.